Focus today. I'm your host, Perry Atkinson. Always a delight when we have time to sit down with our good friend, Mark Meckler. He's with us today, political advisor, pundit. He's an attorney, business executive. He is the president and the co-founder of Convention of States, which is the largest nationwide movement seeking to call the first ever Article 5 Convention of States. And that movement is growing. And he does have a website, conventionofstates.com. There's a picture of the cover, or the landing page of that, and you can order up the Article 5 Convention booklet. You can fill out that, and he'll send you a bunch of those, and it explains everything. Brother Mark, good to see you, friend. How are you, buddy?
Good morning. I'm great. Good to see you as well.
Thank you. Do you have your two small pooches back there?
They are hiding in the background over there.
There they are. Okay.
Always.
A couple of Great Danes. That's good. Hey, let's just start with the Convention of States for a little bit here today. People unfamiliar with it, tell us what you're doing.
Yeah, so people are frustrated with the size and scope of Washington, D.C. They think we need term limits and a balanced budget. They think that we need to take power away from D.C. and give it back to the people. I agree with all of that. The politicians will never do any of that for us because it's not to their benefit. But the framers gave us a way to do it. They said, if the federal government ever gets out of control, you can use Article 5 of the Constitution. The states can gather in convention when 34 states want to, and you can propose amendments to do those things to limit the federal government. So that's what we're doing. Again, it takes 34 states or 2/3 of the states to do it. So far, 20 states have done it. So we are well on our way to calling the first ever Convention of States.
So there's a reason Article 5 is there.
I mean, the reason is today, literally, what the framers told us was that there would come a time when the federal government got out of control and became unresponsive to the American people. And they wanted to give us a tool to deal with it so that we didn't have to have a revolution again. So we didn't have to do what they did. So they gave us this tool. They made it so that it's not easy to use. It's a very high bar. They didn't want us doing this frivolously, but they did give us this tool to push back against the federal government. And look, the American people have wanted term limits on Congress for at least 30 or 35 years now. They've wanted a balanced budget for the same amount of time period. That's about 85% of the American people want those things. They're never going to do it. And the framers didn't want us to have to fight a revolution over it. They wanted us to be able to call a convention. So that's what we're doing.
Okay. In your opinion, has too much shifted from the states to the federal government power?
Oh, way too much, Perry. I mean, if you look at it originally in the Constitution, there were 17 enumerated powers. The framers told us that much and no more. It was supposed to be limited and enumerated in the federal government, and it was supposed to be unlimited and unenumerated in the states and with the people. Today, that pyramid has essentially reversed itself. It's pretty much unlimited power at the level of the federal government, and the states have been throttled back to be mere vassal states of the federal government.
So I guess the big question, Mark, can we get this government to live within the confines of the Constitution?
I mean, I think we can if we call a convention. And the reason that I say that very specifically is that we have a long history of proposing and ratifying amendments to the Constitution. There have been 27 of them so far. And by and large, the federal government follows those amendments. They stick with them. And the reason is that when you propose and ratify an amendment, it takes 38 states to ratify. This is an effort of extreme political muscularity, extreme political will. Nothing bigger in our entire system. So when you have 3/4 of the states all agree that something needs to be placed, a limitation needs to be placed on the federal government, the federal government tends to go along with that.
Okay. Are we currently in a constitutional crisis?
You know, I think we're at least very close to a constitutional crisis, and I can't point to any one thing. I can point to a lot of things that lead me to call this a crisis. I think that term is somewhat overused, and that's why I'm a little bit hesitant. But right now, we have a deep state, and I think all your viewers know what that means. And people who are entrenched in the federal government for 20, 30, or 40 years, they don't do what the president wants, even though theoretically they work for the president. They do what they want. That tends to lean very left. We have courts that are acting, in my opinion, extrajudicially, extra constitutionally. They're doing things that they know are at odds with the United States Constitution. I would point to the Ninth Circuit most obviously. They're the most overturned circuit in the country. And then we have lawfare against folks on the right trying to shut down our freedom of speech, our freedom of association, our freedom of religion. And so I think all of those things added up and much more, all the investigations into Trump that have proven nothing, the lawsuits, all this stuff, that does together constitute a constitutional crisis, in my opinion.
What about the national debt? Isn't that a crisis?
Yeah, I mean, that is absolutely a crisis. I wouldn't specifically call it a constitutional crisis because there's no prohibition against the debt in the Constitution. It's a moral crisis. The framers understood and believed that it was immoral to impose one generation's debt on another generation. We are now imposing multiple generations of debt on multiple future generations. That's a moral crisis. I think everybody would agree. Like if you were to say, I'm going to impose my debt on my children and my grandchildren on a personal basis, we don't allow that in this country. They don't inherit your credit card debt. They don't inherit any of your consumer debt. We think that's immoral to do. We don't allow it under law, and it should not be allowed constitutionally.
Yeah, good point. I want to come back to the Supreme Court just a little bit. Maybe all of this pressing of the Constitution is, and maybe borderline crises. We have seen recently, Mark, some cases where the Supreme Court has made a decision and yet it's been violated and there's no consequence. Is that a vulnerability?
Yeah, it is a vulnerability. I think, look, the court, in my opinion, is still an institution that I believe in. I don't like it because the left is constantly attacking the viability of the court, the integrity of the court, the independence of the court. And I want to be really clear for your viewers because most people don't pay that close attention to the court. And I understand that it's not something you need to pay attention to every day. But the vast majority of the decisions of the court, and by vast, I mean 80, 85, 90% of the decisions of the Supreme Court are 9-0 decisions. And they're made about issues that you and I don't think about: federal civil procedure, criminal law, things that we're not paying attention to every day. They're not controversial. And the court generally agrees on those. So it still is a body that, in large measure, agrees unanimously on most things in the country. It's the social issues, the real hot button issues, where the court is divided. And so I think we need to pay attention to the court in that way. I think it's an important institution. I think we need to protect it. And I personally still think that the court is headed in the right direction.
Okay, what about the lower courts?
I think this is where we see a lot of the problems. The lower courts are inherently very partisan. Judges are appointed by the presidents on the regular. This is a constant thing that presidents do. They'll appoint 150 to 250 judges during their tenure. And these are incredibly political appointments. And I think that's a problem. I think there is a ready remedy to that problem if Congress is willing to take it up. And I think they need to, which is when a judge repeatedly acts in a manner that is inconsistent with the grounds of the Constitution and the boundaries of the Constitution, then that judge should be impeached. I believe that is cause. In fact, I would say unequivocally, legally, that is cause for impeachment. The Senate has always been hesitant to impeach federal judges. I think we need to begin doing that. And I think once you impeach 2, 3, 4 judges, what will happen is whether or not they get removed, because you need the House to call for the impeachment. You need the Senate to vote for the impeachment. Whether or not we can reach that threshold in the Senate is a question. But I think once you start impeaching them, you will start to see judges behave themselves.
With lawfare being what it is, and especially against President Trump, and now the exposure of some of these judges and attorney generals, it's obvious what they were doing, and they've been caught, but they haven't been impeached. What does that do to us long term?
Well, I think the failure to impeach and the failure to prosecute people who've been engaged in wrongdoing and who've been caught very obviously engaged in very serious wrongdoing is it undermines our entire system of law. We're a society based on rule of law. And again, I think this is something that your listeners should really contemplate. Rule of law and being a society based on rule of law is generally a choice. And here's what I mean by that. You have a choice whether you comply with most of the laws you comply with. Mostly, you're not going to get caught because you can't catch everybody doing everything all of the time. So the system requires voluntary compliance. What happens is when we see federal officials not complying, getting caught, and not being prosecuted, it tends to demoralize the public to the point where they think, well, why am I following the laws? If this guy doesn't follow the law and he gets caught and nothing happens to him, why should I even bother following the law? It creates a moral rot in a society based on rule of law that I think is very dangerous.
All right, that kind of sets up where I kind of wanted to go. The demoralization of America is now the great interference of voluntarily obeying the law. And we have been demoralized in all aspects of our culture. We've been demoralized. Um, and if we allow this to continue, Mark, then the Constitution is greatly weakened. How do we turn this around?
Yeah, I think we have to understand our history first, and we have to understand that this is actually being financed and organized by foreign actors. This has been going on for a very long time. Uh, Defected from the Soviet Union and the United States. I might get his last name wrong, so forgive me, but I think it's Yuri Bezmekov. And he did a long form interview in the 1970s describing what the Soviet Union was doing in regard to the United States. This was an effort that he was in charge of for a very long time. And the first step of the Soviet Union, and the CCP is engaged in this as well right now, the first step is demoralization. What you want to do is you want to create a generation or two that does not believe in the ideals of the country. And they've certainly done that with their long march through the institutions, again, funded in large measure by the Soviet Union, now by the CCP and other enemies of the United States. What they're trying to do is make people not believe in the United States of America, and they've done an extraordinary job. So the first thing, in my opinion, that we have to do, this is really important. I think Trump is doing some of it, but not enough. We have to root out, especially CCP, Chinese Communist Party influence in the United States of America. They should not be allowed. It should be absolutely prohibited for any foreign government to give any money to a U.S. institution of higher learning. That would be a good first step.
Amazing. I want to come to one other question. It kind of deals with all this justice stuff going on. What do you think about the re-indictment of James Comey?
I have mixed feelings about it. I mean, I think Comey is a bad actor. I think he did a lot of stuff that was illegal, unfortunately, much of it outside the statute of limitations. And this particular prosecution, from my perspective, is just sort of weak tea. So I don't like it from a legal basis, but there is a part of it that I do like, which is this is very aggressive partisan lawfare. I'm not a fan of very aggressive partisan lawfare. However, I do believe if the left believes that they can do aggressive partisan lawfare and the right will never respond in kind, then that's a fight we're going to lose. So, well, I think it's probably a pretty weak case and he's not going to be convicted. I understand the political reasons and the sociological reasons, psychological reasons for putting the left through this kind of case because they've done it for so many of us for so long.
Yeah. All right, I want to come back to Article 5, the Convention of States, one more time. And I'm looking at this, Mark, from how close some of these elections are happening in America. Let's just assume for a moment you get your majority of the states and you call a convention. That also could be a spark plug for people coming to that convention doing just the opposite. How do we safeguard that?
Yeah, I think the convention has built-in mechanisms to safeguard against that. In fact, that's the one thing I don't worry about at all. I do worry a little bit about will they be able to get anything done if all 50 states got 50 different perspectives and probably a lot more than 50 different perspectives. Can you even get 26 states to agree on a proposed amendment, the exact text of a proposed amendment? I think that's a high bar. I think as far as something going wrong in convention, it's literally impossible. 34 states have to call the convention based on a limited specific basis. Ours is calling for term limits, calling for any fiscal restraints on the federal government, calling for taking power away from a federal government. So remember, a supermajority has agreed in advance. They will control the convention. They will elect the convention officers. And then it takes 26 states to agree. And once you get past that, now you have to ratify by 38 states as supermajority. So really, Perry, from my perspective, the idea that something could, quote unquote, go wrong at convention, other than maybe it's hard to come to agreement, I just don't think there's any chance, literally zero chance of something going wrong.
All right, that's a great explanation. So back to what would be the driving agenda item, a balanced budget, term limits, would that be the driving agenda item?
I think those are two of the biggest. I mean, everybody, 85% of Americans want term limits on Congress. By the way, we also propose term limits on bureaucrats and staffers, the deep state. I think that's really important if you're going to have term limits on Congress. So I would say that's a really important one. I think also a balanced budget, but also imposing things like regular, generally accepted accounting principles on the federal government. Most people don't realize there is no coherent set of principles by which the federal government does their accounting, meaning you and I can't even actually know how much debt there is. I'll give you a specific example. We talk about the current long-term debt being $38 trillion, it's unimaginable. But there's also probably another 170 trillion, maybe 150 trillion of unfunded liabilities, long-term unfunded liabilities like Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid. These are things that we promised we're going to pay. They're on the books, they're statutory, but we don't have the money to pay them. Those are not accounted for. So I think we need financial controls. I think there's something called a single subject amendment, which would force Congress to pass bills that only have one subject in them instead of these 1,000-page omnibus bills that not only nobody reads, nobody can read. You have a single subject amendment that's unanimously popular. Limiting the Supreme Court to 9 justices is another one that's wildly popular among the American public to prevent court packing. So I think there are a bunch that will come out. The ones that aren't going to come out, Perry, are the controversial ones on either side. Ones that I might like. For example, you're not going to get a right to life amendment. On a personal level, I think life begins at conception. We should ban abortion unequivocally. It's murder. That should be a federal crime. That will not come out of convention. It wouldn't be ratifiable. So I just don't believe that's going to happen. Yeah. And on the left, they talk about, they want to ban guns. They want to repeal the Second Amendment. That's not available in this convention. Even if it were, it couldn't be ratified in 38 states, not even close. You couldn't even get 26 states to agree to that. There are already 29 states that have constitutional carry. So what all of this means to me in short is nothing radical can come out of convention, only things that the broad swath of the American people want.
So a balanced budget would be the first step towards GAP, wouldn't it?
It would. And I think this is critically important. The reason we don't balance our budget right now, it's really actually not about how much money we have and whether we can afford to balance our budget. We're all seeing the waste, fraud, and abuse. These programs are bloated beyond anything we could possibly understand. The reason we don't balance the budget is there's no political incentive for a politician to balance the budget. You're going to get yelled at if you cut programs. You're going to get yelled at if you do away with spending. They're going to run campaigns against you. So why would they do it? It's not their money. It doesn't matter to them. And we see this on the Republican side. It's not just Democrat. And so we have to give them an incentive. The incentive is the Constitution says you must do this.
All right, let me take a quick break. Go to the conventionofstates.com. That's Mark's website, and order up these booklets. He'll send them to you, and order quite a few of them and hand them out, especially if you're at a maybe a Central Committee meeting, hand them out. And it's called the Article 5 Convention, a little booklet, conventionofstates.com. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Mark Meckler's with us. Always an honor to have him. And he's the president and co-founder of Convention of States, which is the largest nationwide movement seeking to call the first ever Article 5 Convention of States. And you can go to his website and get the little booklet, conventionofstates.com. He'll send them to you in bunches, and you can send them out and hand them out, and it explains everything that we're talking about here. Mark, I want to turn your attention to the big headlines. What's your take on what's happening between Israel, the United States, and Iran?
I mean, I guess the first piece of that right now is there's apparently some major controversy about something that they say, and I say that with air quotes, they say President Trump said to Benjamin Netanyahu. I want your listeners to take that with a grain of salt. And the reason I say that is the source is Axios. They're a leftist site. The particular guy that wrote the story, Barak Ravid, has been proven wrong over and over and over again. He is very anti-Israel. He likes to sow discord between the president and Israel to the best of his ability, but he's been proven wrong over and over when he does this same kind of stuff. So when you hear a story like this, President Trump tearing into Benjamin Netanyahu or whatever, I generally don't pay attention to stuff like that. That's fostered by, it's created by, frankly, our enemies. If you look at how that has spread around the internet, I find this fascinating, Perry. There's a bunch of stories about how that is promoted by CCP bots, by Russian bots. They're trying to create a divide between the U.S. and Israel. So that's number one. Number two, I am worried about the course of the war. I expected it to be done by now. I was hoping it would be done by now. What my personal opinion is that it's time for Trump to be decisive. And by decisive, I mean he needs to take out Karg Island. It wouldn't take a lot to do that. Karg Island is the financial and oil lifeline for Iran. Without Karg Island being operational, there is zero chance that the mullahs have any money. And money is what makes that theocracy go round.
All right. So Israel wanted to attack Beirut. and the president asked them to hold off. Two questions. What did Israel see in Beirut that would be the target? And why would the president suspend that?
Again, it's hard to know what's true, but we do know that the president has in the past asked Israel to hold off on particular attacks. What Israel sees in Beirut is leadership structure for Hezbollah. It's important for folks to remember that Hezbollah is an Iranian terrorist proxy. And what they do, their entire purpose is to destroy, torment, torture, interfere in Israel through violent means. They have ensconced themselves in Lebanon in a way that they're now part of the government, but they are, make no mistake, a terrorist organization. That's their primary purpose, is the destruction of Israel through military means. And so when Israel is striking Beirut, they are striking at the heart of Hezbollah. Hezbollah is not just in the Bekaa Valley in the south of Lebanon, where they really threaten Israel, but their leadership is in Beirut. And until the government of Lebanon does away with that, we're going to have that problem permanently. Pardon the loud dogs in the background there.
Sounds like Tiny's hungry. Did you give Tiny your breakfast yet?
I think he's telling me that the UPS guy is here to do grave violence to the family.
By the way, he's got two Great Danes back there. Okay, so I learned something there. So Beirut is kind of like the headquarters of Hezbollah. So that makes a lot of sense. That makes a total lot of sense. The president's got a lot of pressure. He's got the midterms. He's got high gas prices. And he can't seem to figure out who's running the country. He seems to be literally running out of time. Are you expecting to see some aggression in the next couple of weeks?
It's hard to say. There's a lot of factors here. And it's hard to do this in a single segment, Perry. It almost seems like it should be an entire show.
Yeah.
I keep coming back to this, but one of the things that folks should be watching out for is CCP involvement. Important to understand that somewhere between 30 and 40% of China's oil comes directly from Iran. So they're hurting right now. Also important to remember that a much larger chunk comes through the Straits of Hormuz. So that means China is missing beyond upwards of 40% of their entire oil supply has now been cut off. The president's in a tenuous situation with China. He wants better relations with China to the extent he can have them. We've got a bunch of complicated geopolitical situations with China. If he blows up Karg Island, as I suggested, that really hurts China. So I think there's a game here being played that involves a lot more than Beirut, a lot more than Lebanon, a lot more than Iran. China is involved in that play too, as well as Russia. It's a complicated geopolitical situation. And the short answer to your question is, yeah, I do think we're running out of time.
Okay, because when you look at that, and you make some great points here, you got to add Pakistan to kind of like the list, because that's the trains coming down out of Russia, coming through Pakistan, supplying them with drones and everything else. And yet Pakistan's trying to be the peace broker. I mean, it's a complicated mess.
Yeah, and Pakistan is not and has never been an honest broker. That is an Islamist dictatorship. The fact that they're a member of NATO, to me, is just outrageous. You know, we talked about Article 5 here in the U.S. Article 5 of the NATO Charter says that whenever one member of NATO is attacked, all the other members should come to its defense. I find it hard to believe that we're going to put troops on the ground or defend Pakistan if something happens there, because, again, that is an Islamist country. They try to play both sides of the fence. They are, generally speaking, an anti-American country. So that is another very complicating factor. People who try to simplify the Middle East and say it's Israel versus the Arabs, or, you know, it's just about Iran, or it's about Beirut. It is a complicated situation that is a worldwide flashpoint.
All right, just isolating Israel for a moment. Do you think they are going to be inevitably forced to finish the job in Lebanon with Hezbollah and in Gaza with Hamas?
Look, I think there are fundamental questions about whether they can finish the job. Do I believe they can finish the job in Gaza? My answer is yes. And I think the strategic failure there has been, and partially because of the U.S.'s insistence, has been going too slow. The world grows weary of war. And so Israel's now been at war for several years in Gaza. That's a problem. I think they need to finish it off. I think they can finish that off. I think they can hold that territory. They have in the past. I think they're going to have to in the future. I think that's inevitable. I think Lebanon is another story. Lebanon is a completely separate sovereign country. You have a military aspect, a terrorist aspect that's now embedded itself into that country. Can Israel handle both Lebanon and Gaza at the same time? I have my doubts about that.
Last question. At what point is armament going to be, the availability of armament going to be on the table, not only with the United States and its activity in Iran, but the United States supplying Israel with armament?
Yeah, that's on the table right now. This is a serious problem. I've been talking about this in the media a little bit. Some people get upset with me because they think I'm being a naysayer or a doomsayer. But we do have a limited stockpile of armaments, and we are running low. And I want to clarify by what I mean when I say we're running low. The United States has plenty of armaments. We're not physically running low on armaments, but those who are responsible for the defense of the United States at large in the world at the Department of Defense, and this goes from Secretary of War Hegseth on down, they don't just look at what pace are we using armaments right now. They look at the Chinese lens and they look at the Russian lens, and they have to make a decision. Do we have enough armaments to fight a two-front battle or three-front battle? Should, for example, China decide that now is the time to take Taiwan, we have to have a stockpile significant enough to handle that fight. And right now we're getting dangerously close to that limitation.
Okay. Mark, thank you for your time. I value it greatly. Thank you for your devotion. Let me say to our viewers and listeners, check out the website, conventionofstates.com. And he has a little booklet. In fact, we still have some here. But he can send them to you in a package, and you can hand them out at your Central Committee meeting or whatever you do, and explains Article 5, much like what we talked about today. Thank you, Mark. God bless you, pal. Take care of your dogs. They're hungry.
Thanks, Gary. God bless.
I'll see you later.